You've spent years convincing yourself this performance is who you actually are. You mistake safety for authenticity. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, who mapped the architecture of the unconscious mind. But beneath that careful mask, pressure builds. You sense a split forming, a private suspicion that something has been left behind. That continual glancing outward, constellating your life with borrowed constellations, costs you a quiet ache. In memories, dreams, reflections, this tension surfaces in the simplest terms. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. The real trouble isn't just the mask, but how even the smallest departures from it can feel perilous. Swapping a scripted response for an honest word might as well be jumping from a ledge. You grip the routine, telling yourself it's protection when, deep down, it's a form of self-erasure. The performance survives by keeping the darkness just out of reach. Never named, never seen. But its presence is constant, a silent amendment attached to everything you do. This is where the story twists. Left unexamined, the split between your surface and your core deepens. In Psychology and Alchemy, this thinker exposes the true cost of neglecting your hidden facets. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The false self demands ever more rehearsal, ever more silencing of impulse, until even private moments are governed by imaginary audiences. At its core, the fear is both old and stubborn. If you let the mask slip, love or belonging will vanish. Approval is rationed. It feels conditional on maintaining the performance, not speaking any forbidden truth within. The real injury is quieter than shame. It's the slow starvation of possibility, when you forget what you once loved just for its own sake. Every culture has unspoken scripts. Historical context sharpens the problem. In rigidly stratified societies, the cost of deviation is exile or ridicule. The individual internalizes these external threats. Even when no one is watching, the policing voice persists. Whole generations can pass wearing shop-worn identities, never testing the weight of unvoiced longings. The mechanism is ancient, tuned for survival, but it becomes maladaptive when the threats are social rather than physical. You learn to shrink the unsanctioned, to smooth over contradiction until even you believe it. Inward questions get replaced with outward compliance, and the result is often a chronic unease that no amount of external validation can fix. You see this in real-world choices. The mid-level employee declining a promotion because it might demand an unwelcome confrontation with their limits. The friend who downplays their passion in order to fit, then feels invisible even in company. Or someone who stays in a relationship, numbing what they desire, because leaving would violate the role assigned to them by family or tradition. It's never as simple as lying. It's a slow, steady amputation of possibility. Regret accumulates not in grand betrayals, but in all the small silences where the true self remains unsaid. Inside, fear operates through anticipation, not of isolated pain, but of endless unraveling. If you confess the truth in even one domain, you worry the entire structure will collapse. Alienation is painted as a certainty, not an option. This conviction smothers curiosity. It's the belief that making anything unconscious conscious will expose some unworthy core. You end up living defensively, defending a fortress that was supposed to house you, not imprison you. The cost compounds with time. By not breaking the performance, you inadvertently let real connection slip away. Others love your image, not your reality. The more you sacrifice what is raw and unapproved, the more empty performances begin to feel like solitary confinement. This spiral is hard to escape because the loss is subtle. You can't mourn a self you barely dared to imagine. Future longing is written off as immaturity, not urgency. The performance gets mistaken for a stable identity, until crisis or fatigue cracks it open. What is most damning? You eventually forget the texture of honest presence altogether. Your truest impulses appear as disruptions, dismissible, even dangerous. Meanwhile, the locked-away fragments grow heavier, dragging on your waking hours. You keep waiting for permission to stop, hoping someone else will grant it. It never comes, not until you ask yourself and listen, through the discomfort, for an answer that feels like an awakening rather than a script. But at the peak of this charade, another resistance emerges. Terror at what you might hear if you really listen. Beneath the practiced roles, something wordless vibrates, equal parts warning and invitation. Even in silence, the refusals echo. You scan for cues, clamp down harder, invent justifications, anything to spare yourself the ordeal of facing that question honestly. Is it attention you fear? Exposure? Ridicule? Or is it something colder, that your real self, when summoned, might sound unfamiliar and small? This dread becomes its own ritual, strangely reassuring. Better to dwell in the known discomfort than risk rupture. Yet the defenses only tighten as your longing intensifies. Unbidden memories surface in odd moments. A conversation, a laugh, the feel of air after a storm. You dismiss these flashbulb fragments, but their persistence needles you. The heaviness feels structural now, like the body has internalized the lie and cannot let go. Appetite for distraction spikes. Solitude grows laced with accusation. Each day lived out of sync costs a little more. Somewhere inside, you start to wonder, was the bargain ever worth it? Uncertainty gnaws around the edges. The prospect of undoing years of performance seems arduous, but the cost of continuation is worse. You feel a sharpened hunger for coherence, sometimes so raw you mistake it for anger. This longing is not just yearning, but warning. The self detached from its truth goes brittle, and soon enough, it starts to break. Familiar pleasures fade. You notice how gestures ring hollow. Laughter sounds distant. Even your dreams slip out of focus. It is not depression. Not exactly. More like the suffocation of living under borrowed air. Still, the idea of risking exposure remains terrifying. Paradox. To stay hidden is agony. To emerge feels impossible. You grasp for guidance, hoping someone will draw the line for you. But real permission, you realize, is internal. No one can offer the absolution you seek. It is here, at this crossroads, that his warning demands attention. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, he writes plainly about the price and privilege of truth. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You can feel the stakes shift as the line lands. Some truths are so sharply self-evident they cannot be dodged, only delayed. This is the moment the gears grind. The performance cannot be rehabilitated, only abandoned. Identity built as armor always rusts. The longing to become is inseparable from the weight of hiding. And here's the turning point. The pulse you cannot unconvince yourself of. Presence does not wait for permission. It only waits for you to stop pretending. That realization splits the room into before and after. The mask begins to itch. You start noticing micro choices, the story you repeat at parties, the pause before saying yes, the joke that lands but empties you a little more each time. Suddenly, each one feels like an invitation to come clean, or another stone on your chest. Something elemental shifts as you accept this. You do not break apart, but stretch uncomfortably toward what is real. Panic pulses, but clarity pierces through it. If the cost of dropping the act is uncertainty, the return is a self you can live with, one that stands on its own, trembling but intact. This is not a dramatic exit. There is no singular unmasking, no applause. Revelation is lived in tiny refusals, a no delivered softly, the refusal to polish your story, the willingness to let silences hang. Friends might flinch, some drift away. Each loss leaves space for something harder, but truer, a kind of ease that stings as it heals. Suddenly, the hunger shifts. What you wanted was never permission, but possibility. Space enough to re-inhabit yourself, sentences that no longer feel rehearsed. You realize the world can't guarantee this, and it never could. The only invitation that matters is the one you give yourself. To answer it is to let the fragments reassemble, to feel the difference between endurance and presence. There will be fear at the door. Let it come. The alternative, the old equilibrium, the familiar heaviness, is now unthinkable. If there is a cost to this kind of honesty, it is nothing compared to the debt of a life undone by performance. The task is not to become exceptional, but to become actual. And at that moment, everything you postponed comes rushing in. Memory, hunger, laughter, sorrow, belonging. All at once, unmediated and yours. This is the turning, where dread and desire meet, and the only thing left to risk is your own reality. It's here, in the clarity that follows surrender, that a peculiar freedom appears. The surface tension breaks. Suddenly, that irritation with others, that simmering grievance, begins to feel less like proof of their failures and more like a mirror held to your face. In memories, dreams, reflections, he cuts to the real cost and reward of this. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. There it is, the old enemies, envy, judgment, blame, start looking more like invitations. Every annoyance is a signal flare, marking the place you have not yet chosen to see. That relentless co-worker, the parent who never listened, the lover who turned away. When you step out of performance, these antagonists quietly become guides, pointing you back to unmapped corners of your nature. There's a history here. Whole cultures have staged elaborate rituals to keep discomfort at bay, to wall off the raw encounter. Confessionals, etiquette, codes of silence, all testaments to the energy expended to maintain performance. The ancient Greeks even cast catharsis outwards, pouring emotions into the gods, never letting the full charge pass through their actual lives. But honesty makes ritual obsolete. Ritual preserves the known. Honesty risks the unknown, the unsafe, the unfinished conversation. A deeper mechanism hums underneath it all, the old animal reflex. We fear that dropping the mask will mean losing tribe, station, shelter. Our brains serve up the same warnings they did when the price for standing out was exile or worse. There's a sick thrill to this vulnerability, something nearly physical. You might lose someone's approval. You might gain their rage. But the punishment for silence was never exile. It was self-abandonment. The real risk, all along, was living in a world built out of your own denials. Concrete consequences follow when you let performance govern your days. Opportunities wither because they require your whole self to say yes. Relationships grow brittle, sustained only by agreement and mutual editing. Laughter turns hollow. Even memory is filtered, so your past is half imagined. You lose your sense of time, of your own particular rhythm. The promise of safety becomes a trap, and every day you wake a little further from your own life. That's the cost of refusing that moment at the door. But if you turn toward the raw encounter, if you let your presence actually collide with another's, transformation begins. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, he delivers the effect straight, without mitigation. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The walls between start to dissolve. There's no map for what happens next, just the unmistakable sense of movement, together or apart. The air changes in the room when masks fall away. What begins as risk ends as recognition, a shock of belonging that's impossible to counterfeit. So the reward for this turning is not a medal or a finished self, but something subtler, a taste of the vivid, a loosening of the old grip. You recover the ability to be surprised by yourself. You escape the numbness that comes from overthinking your own every word. Contact becomes alchemy, unpredictable, urgent, the erosion of despair by real hope. You risk everything, only to find you needed to lose it. The debt is canceled. You step from rehearsal into reality, and the night air feels different on your skin. Even inside the uncertainty, you're finally allowed to mean what you say, and to let the world answer you back. Stepping from rehearsal into reality opens new possibilities for deeper connection. Embrace the uncertainty and let it transform you. If this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and comment below. What part of your life needs a real connection?